A fault near Los Angeles that should be sliding 16 feet every century has barely moved in 169 years, and new modeling says the ground beneath it is now more stressed than at any point in the past 1,000 years. Scientists just gave that danger a name, an earthquake gate, a hidden junction that decides whether a rupture stays small or tears through two fault systems at once. But the real unsettling part isn't the missing earthquake. It's what other instruments just detected moving deep underground, completely unfelt, while everyone assumed this fault had gone completely silent. 50 miles northeast of downtown Los Angeles, the San Gabriel Mountains give way to the San Bernardino Range at a narrow gap called Cajon Pass. Interstate 15 runs through it, one of the few routes connecting the Los Angeles basin to the inland deserts and Las Vegas. So do freight rail lines and major power corridors feeding electricity into San Bernardino and the Coachella Valley. Every day, thousands of drivers cross this exact junction without a second thought, unaware they're passing directly above the numbers now dominating seismology journals. And directly beneath all of that infrastructure, two of California's most dangerous faults, the San Andreas and the San Jacinto, come close enough to almost touch. A new study, led by geophysicist Lilian Burkhardt at the University of Bern, just recalculated exactly how much pressure has built up on the rock underneath that intersection. The team fed a physics-based model a full 1,000-year earthquake history, reconstructed from radiocarbon dating, tree ring records, and old accounts of ground rupture, then layered in modern satellite measurements of how fast the ground is actually creeping. The result? Stress on the San Andreas, just northwest of the pass, has hit 2.8 megapascals, edging past the previous high of 2.7. On the San Jacinto side, southeast of the pass, it has hit 3.6 megapascals. That's not a near record. That's the highest value the model has produced anywhere in its entire 1,000-year simulation. A megapascal is roughly 10 times normal atmospheric pressure, applied not to a small patch of ground, but across dozens of miles of locked rock. Engineers use exactly that kind of number to estimate how far a rupture could travel once it starts, and how strongly the ground above it would shake. Numbers like that only mean something once you know what should be happening instead. Along this stretch, the Pacific and North American plates are supposed to grind past each other by roughly 16 feet every 100 years. That motion has to go somewhere. Either the ground slides gradually in small, manageable increments, or it locks, and the built-up motion gets stored as stress until something breaks. The last time this exact segment broke in a major way was 1857, the Fort Tejon earthquake, magnitude 7.9. That was 169 years ago. So the obvious explanation writes itself. The fault has been locked that entire time, silently absorbing motion it should have released in dozens of smaller earthquakes. And the pressure has simply been climbing without end. The new stress numbers support exactly that story. It's clean, it's frightening, and it's not the whole picture. Because silent is doing two different jobs in this story, and they are not the same job. One meaning is what the Cajon Pass study is describing, a fault that has not produced a large earthquake in over a century and a half. The other meaning comes from a completely different piece of research, published the same summer, about a completely different stretch of the San Andreas, and it says something almost the opposite. That fault is not motionless at all. It has been moving this whole time. Nobody could see it until now. Two headlines, two faults, one word doing all the work between them. Untangling that word is where this investigation actually starts. Start with the first explanation, because it is the one most people will assume, and it deserves to be tested honestly before anything else. A locked fault is not a mysterious concept. Faults lock when friction along the surface is strong enough to resist the steady push of plate motion. Picture two rough surfaces pressed together under enormous weight, catching on every irregularity instead of sliding smoothly. That is friction doing exactly what it is supposed to do until it cannot anymore. The stress does not disappear. It transfers into the surrounding rock, like tightening a spring that has nowhere to release. Eventually, the friction fails, and everything stored in that spring lets go at once. That is a textbook mechanism, and the Cajon Pass numbers fit it well. But not every part of the San Andreas behaves this way, and that is the first crack in the simple version of the story. Farther north, near Parkfield and Hollister, sections of the same fault creep. They slide a little every year, quietly, without producing damaging shaking, because friction there is weaker and stress never gets the chance to build to dangerous levels. In Hollister, that creep is visible without any instrument at all. Curbs are offset. Sidewalks and building foundations have been slowly dragged and cracked sideways for decades, a few millimeters at a time, because the ground underneath simply never stops moving. It looks alarming. It is, in fact, the safer version of this fault, spending its motion gradually instead of saving it up. Locked and creeping are two real, well-documented behaviors on the exact same fault system. So the question stops being, is the fault storing energy? It becomes, which kind of fault segment is this, and how confident can anyone actually be about that label? That question got harder to answer this July. A separate research team, led by Zara Zali at the GFZ Helmholtz Center for Geosciences, working with scientists from EarthScope and Stanford, trained an AI system on more than a decade of data from 4 borehole strain meters buried near Parkfield, instruments sensitive enough to detect rock deforming by fractions of a millimeter. Those instruments, installed by EarthScope's National Geophysical Facility, do not listen for shaking. They measure rock bending, the way a fiberglass rod flexes before it snaps. A slow slip event is not a miniature earthquake. It is the same kind of fault motion, stretched out over hours or days instead of seconds, releasing real energy too slowly for a person or an ordinary seismograph to ever notice. The AI found dozens of short, quiet, slow-slip events, movements, real fault motion, producing no shaking a person could feel, invisible to ordinary seismographs, and missed by human researchers for years. And critically, those silent slips were systematically followed by bursts of small, low-frequency earthquakes days later. That finding matters for a reason that goes beyond Parkfield. If a section of the San Andreas that scientists have studied for over a decade, with dedicated instruments built specifically to watch it, was still hiding motion nobody detected until an algorithm found it, then the confidence behind labeling any segment simply locked and storing stress gets shakier. Silence, it turns out, is not the same as stillness. A fault can look frozen on the surface and be quietly negotiating with itself underground the entire time. That does not mean Cajon Pass is secretly creeping too. There is no evidence for that specific claim, and the researchers behind the stress study never suggested it. What it means is something narrower and, in its own way, more unsettling. The tools used to declare a fault silent have a documented blind spot, and that blind spot was only discovered because someone happened to build the right instrument in the right place. Nobody has built that instrument at Cajon Pass yet. So set the slow slip question aside for a moment, because the Burkhardt team's actual discovery isn't really about how much stress one fault is holding. It's about a concept nobody had formally named before the study, the earthquake gate. Cajon Pass isn't just a place where two faults happen to be close together. It's a junction that has, historically, made a decision. In 1857, the Fort Tejon earthquake ruptured the San Andreas and then stopped right at the pass. It never crossed into the San Jacinto Fault. But go back further, to 1812, and a very different earthquake near Wrightwood did cross that junction, rupturing both fault systems in a single event. Paleoseismic evidence suggests that kind of joint rupture has happened at least 3 times in the last 2,000 years. Same location, 2 completely different outcomes. The burn team's model suggests the deciding factor is not simply how much stress has built up on one fault. It's how closely matched the stress is between the 2 faults meeting at the gate. When one side is under dramatically more pressure than the other, a rupture tends to run out of energy and stop at the junction, the way it did in 1857. When both sides are loaded to similarly high levels, historically, that's closer to the conditions that let a rupture blow through and take both faults at once, the way it did in 1812. And that's exactly the configuration the new numbers describe. 2.8 megapascals on one side, 3.6 megapascals on the other. Not identical, but close enough in the author's own framing to resemble the stress balance seen before past multi-fault ruptures. A single fault earthquake here would already be serious. A joint rupture through the gate would be a different category of event entirely, with the potential to shake Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside, and the Coachella Valley simultaneously, cutting the freeway, the rail line, and the power corridor that all thread through the same narrow gap at once, and severing one of the few direct routes connecting Southern California to the desert Southwest. Even the scientists who built this model are careful about what it does and does not claim. Burkhardt has said directly that this is not a prediction of when an earthquake will happen. Co-author Catherine Scharrer of the U.S. Geological Survey has called it a result worth taking seriously, while acknowledging that every model like this carries real uncertainty. That's not scientists hedging out of caution theater. It's an honest admission that a 1,000-year reconstruction built from tree rings and old fault scars, however carefully done, is an estimate, not a direct readout. Which raises the next question the story needs answered. How solid is that 1,000-year baseline in the first place? And has anything like this happened before that we simply failed to notice? The honest answer is complicated. The 1,000-year earthquake catalog behind this model comes from radiocarbon dating of buried fault scarps, tree ring dating of disturbed forests, and historical accounts of ground rupture going back centuries, not continuous instrumental monitoring. Geologists build catalogs like this by digging trenches directly across the fault trace and reading the exposed soil layers the way you'd read pages in a book, tracing offset stream channels and buried sand deposits to date each past rupture. Older events by nature carry wider error bars than recent ones. That does not make the highest stress in 1,000 years finding wrong. It means the confidence behind that number thins out the further back the comparison reaches, the same way any reconstructed record does. There's a second, older mystery layered on top of this one that makes the whole fault system look even stranger. South of Cajon Pass, the southernmost stretch of the San Andreas, roughly 60 miles running toward the Coachella Valley, has never ruptured in recorded history at all. In places, you can walk right up to the fault trace out there, a visible seam in the desert floor, where date palm groves and hot springs mark the exact line where two tectonic plates meet. It looks peaceful. Geologically, it's the most overdue stretch of the entire system. Not in 1857, not in any documented event since. Scientists studying that segment have called it locked and loaded for over 2 centuries, potentially capable of slipping more than 30 feet in a single event if it finally lets go. It's a different piece of the same fault, a different open question, and it's been sitting there for decades, mostly unresolved, while attention rotates toward whichever segment produces the newest headline. To understand what a rupture like that could actually mean on the ground, look back at the United States Geological Survey's 2008 shakeout scenario, a planning exercise that modeled a single magnitude 7.8 earthquake on the southern San Andreas. Even accounting for modern retrofitting, the scenario estimated roughly 1,800 deaths and $213 billion in damage. That number is not a forecast for what is happening now, and it modeled one fault rupturing alone, not the two-fault gate scenario the new Cajon Pass research is describing. But it is the closest concrete answer available to the question underneath all of this: what does the big one actually cost? To be clear about what has and has not happened here, no earthquake has struck Cajon Pass. There are no injuries, no damage, no evacuations, and the United States Geological Survey has not raised any alert level. What is new is a recalculated model, not an event on the ground. That distinction matters because it is the difference between a hazard estimate worth preparing for and a disaster that is already unfolding. Here's where the story needs a correction, because it would be easy and wrong to fold the Parkfield slow slip discovery and the Kajun Pass stress discovery into one grand connected narrative. Parkfield sits roughly 150 miles to the northwest on a section of fault known for gentle creep, not locking. Kajun Pass is a different segment entirely, studied by a different team, using different instruments, published in a different journal. There is no evidence the silent slow slip behavior detected near Parkfield is happening at Kajun Pass, and no credible source has linked the two mechanically. What connects them isn't shared cause. It's a shared lesson that the word silent, applied to the San Andreas, has been doing more work than the fault has earned credit for, and scientists are only now building the instruments capable of testing what it actually means in each specific place. It's an easy mistake to make. Both studies broke within weeks of each other. Both used the word silent in coverage. Both involved the same 800-mile fault system. Headlines blurred the line between them because the underlying question, what the San Andreas is doing while nothing appears to be happening, sounds like a single story. It isn't. It's two separate, unfinished investigations that happen to be circling the same word. That leaves one unresolved variable sitting underneath everything else. Nobody currently knows whether the highly stressed segments at Kajun Pass behave more like the locked, all-or-nothing sections that produced 1857 and 1812, or whether they're quietly bleeding off stress in small, undetected increments, the way Parkfield apparently has been for years, simply without the instruments in place yet to prove it either way. So, where does that leave the actual answer to the question in the headline? What's confirmed? Stress on both faults at Kajun Pass has reached the highest modeled levels in 1,000 years, and the relative balance between them resembles conditions that, historically, preceded ruptures crossing both fault systems together. What's interpretation? Researchers believe this raises the odds of a multi-fault event compared to a single fault one, though the model explicitly isn't a countdown. What remains open? Whether hidden seismic movement, like the kind just found at Parkfield, is quietly happening here too, changing the real risk in ways nobody can currently measure. If new instruments installed at the gate eventually detect that same kind of silent creep, it would actually lower the danger this specific model describes by showing some of that stress is already bleeding off on its own. If they detect nothing, the locked interpretation only gets stronger. What would change that picture is more data, not more alarm. Denser GPS and satellite geodesy across the pass to track creep in real time. New borehole strain meters, the same kind that caught Parkfield's hidden slips, installed directly at the gate itself. Continued paleoseismic trenching to tighten the uncertainty on that 1,000-year baseline. Satellite radar known as INSAR, which measures ground deformation from orbit down to a few millimeters, already covers this stretch of California and gets reprocessed regularly. If creep rates at Kajun Pass start shifting, that record would likely show it before anyone felt a thing. Seismologists will also be watching for any uptick in small background earthquakes directly beneath the pass, minor enough to never make the news on their own, but potentially useful as an early signature if the stress balance between the two faults shifts further. None of that is happening because a disaster is imminent. It's happening because, for the first time, researchers have a specific, testable reason to watch this exact junction more closely than they ever have before. So yes, in the sense the headline promised, the San Andreas really has gone quiet here, quieter than it should be given how fast the ground beneath it wants to move, and the researchers studying it do think today's stress pattern resembles what has, historically, come before a joint rupture. That is how it has started before. It is not a guarantee of how or when it starts again. If you live or drive anywhere near Kajun Pass, San Bernardino, or the Inland Empire, it's worth knowing exactly which fault sits under your daily route, because most people who cross it never have. Somewhere under Kajun Pass tonight, the rock is still locked, still absorbing motion it hasn't released in 169 years, while a few hundred miles north, a strain meter buried in the ground near Parkfield keeps recording tiny, silent movements that no one would have known to look for 2 years ago. Both instruments are still listening. Neither has anything to report yet.